have Tamara Thorpe join us. Tamara is currently the president of Theatereuropa, which I'm very much looking forward to talking to her about as well. She is a trainer, consultant. I know you work for several universities, government organizations, and also corporations, and you're particularly, your work deals with leadership and millennials in particular and Generation Z. So I'm looking forward to hearing about that. And you're in Ireland, which is giving me a lot of homesick moments at the minute.
Oh, I bet.
So how are you, Tamara, and how are things currently in Ireland?
Well, it's 23 degrees today in Ireland.
Amazing. Wow.
Yeah. Well, I will say in Dublin, we just drove down from Donegal today. So I'm flying.
Home sweet home.
Yeah.
Where in Donegal were you?
Well, we were in Donegal town, and we drove up to Mailenhead yesterday.
So literally you passed by my parents' door.
Yeah, probably, but it was brilliant to get out of the city after being in lockdown here since March, and to see the green and the sheep and the cow again. It was wonderful. And of course, people were fantastic as usual. And then we came down to Dublin, and it's 23 degrees. So there you go.
Wow, that's warmer than it is in Austria, and normally it's like hot at this time of the year here.
Yeah. We've had rain straight almost for the last 2 weeks. So everyone is out, and you know, in Dublin, when the sun comes out go all the people. So it's a lovely day, and I'm so happy to be here with you.
Oh my God, this is for me the longest ever that I have not been at home, because normally I make it back to Ireland at least every 5 months, and I haven't been since last August, which is killing me. But yeah, Tamara, there's so many things that I'm really excited to talk to you about. But I think maybe one of the things that is just, I think, particularly important at the minute, and I know in your role as the president of SIETAR Austria, you've been doing a lot of work around, you've been, you know, responsible for this statement of racism, and also for the outlining the commitments to action that SIETAR Austria has, or Theatereuropa has signed up for, and you've been organising a series of webinars. Could you just maybe talk a little bit about, you know, instigating that, how important it is, and and how that's running at the minute?
So I will say that this has been certainly an interesting year to be president of Theatereuropa, or any organization for that matter. I know in Austria you've also probably had your own new challenges with, you know, reframing how 2020 was going to be. And actually back in March, when the Theatereuropa Board of Directors came together for our annual face-to-face meeting, we talked about really wanting to challenge Theatereuropa as an organization to start to address diversity and inclusion in a more assertive and authentic way. And we all felt, both as Theatereuropa and with our national SIETARs, that as an organization we could be doing better. So of course, when we saw the Black Lives Matter movement take flight after the death of George Floyd, and it impacting countries and cities all over the world, we came together as a board and thought, you know, now how do we want to show up for our organization? What's really happening in our organization, and how can we best respond? And so we all worked quite diligently, the entire board, on putting together our statement against racism and who we wanted to be as an organization. So I will say it was most definitely a collaborative effort by the entire board of directors. And we know as people in the intercultural field, we have insights into culture and difference and that we use those insights to help other people increase their intercultural competence. But that also sometimes comes with its blind spots. And as an organization, we could be doing better. We could be more diverse, and we most definitely could be more inclusive and do more to create a culture of belonging, and also do more to be actively anti-racist. Mm-hmm. And so we really thought the first best step is to start with learning and education and partnerships. And so I was very pleased that the European Network Against Racism was very open to communicating and partnering with us and contributing to our learning. And then to have members from around the SIETAR community globally want to participate. And since the call has gone out, we have had members, I have been flooded with emails and proposals for our members really wanting to contribute to this dialogue. And so I think that, and I of course have received an overwhelmingly positive response, that members in SIETAR Europa are ready to have this conversation. They're ready to tackle these difficult issues, and many feel it's long overdue. So I am, so happy that this board is so committed, and we're, doing what we can.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's really wonderful to hear, because, it's one of these things, even if you're, I know from teaching, diversity and inclusion, or from teaching different elements of intercultural interaction, racism is one of the topics, if I take this Austrian context, is one of the topics where everybody kind of goes, ooh, it's a bit, it's almost too tough to talk about. And it's something that's not really so relevant, is often one of the comments that you get. And I think, of course, it's something that has been always been relevant, and it's, I just think it's great that SIETAR Europa and SIETARs globally are making use of this opportunity to really, focus on this, and to try and bring up this as an issue of discussion and create dialogue around it, because this is one of the things we typically talk about, is what you're not comfortable talking about, you kind of try to avoid. So I really think it's wonderful. So you've mentioned the first step is this idea of creating learning around it, which is hugely important. What do you think some of the next steps should be, let's say for us as a SIETAR Austria organization? How do you think we should, also step up and take a bit more responsibility? And what would you like to see us and other SIETARs in Europe doing?
So one, I think education, starting with there, is so critical because we all need to be speaking the same language, right? And so when we talk about what racism and anti-racism and bias and all the language and terminology and concepts, having us all on the same page is really, really important. And I think for intercultural and international organizations, this is an important first step. The second step is then really trying to be taking good looks in the mirror and saying, as an organization, where are we reinforcing bias and discrimination intentionally or unintentionally, right? So when we look at how do we decide who's on the board of directors? This is an area where SIETAR Europa specifically, and I've been pushing for the last 2 years, and we've just got a new motion to restructure. But understanding, not only is it about efficiency, but it's also about having an inclusive, open, authentic process, so that the members have a say in who's on the board, and that those who are on the board, in fact, represent the membership. And currently, how we structure our board of directors isn't an open and inclusive process. And it doesn't allow for diverse representation on the board. I would encourage national SIETARs to look at how their leadership is selected, how members are, where we recruit and select members from, looking at our membership fees. Do our membership fees allow for a diverse and inclusive environment? So corporate trainers and people who are working in nonprofit sector also have access to the same organization. I think these are sort of really important internal sort of reviews of what might be some policies and practice we have in place with the best of intention, but in fact mean we're not an inclusive organization. And I think that is something everybody should be doing, you know, as part and parcel, which we're really trying to do with SIETAR Europa, with SIETAR Ireland. We have been kind of starting over the last 2 years, and part of our start over the last 2 years was to make this organization as accessible as possible and as much by the community as for the community. So we have been able to really create some a new membership and a new way of people understanding SIETAR here in Ireland that is much more reflective of what's actually happening in terms of diversity within Ireland. And so I think that is a good place for national SIETARs to start.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. I mean, as with all SIETARs across Europe and the globe, I mean, as voluntary organizations, I know we all have, you know, our issues. I know with SIETAR Austria, we're also, if you like, in this process, we've restarted and we're starting again, and we're really also thinking about, you know, how we can expand and how we can gain members and really more active members. And this is one of the things that we're finding quite challenging. And one thing that I would also really love to see for SIETAR Austria is for us to be able to attract a new generation of, you know, of young people who are interested in the dialogue, in the discussions, in also, you know, taking responsibility for, let's say, where SIETAR Austria is going. And I know you do a lot of your work with leadership and millennials and leadership and Generation Z. So are you managing to attract those generations to SIETAR Ireland? How do you think we could do a better job also for SIETAR Europa? I know we have a young SIETAR organization, and what do they need actually in terms of, you know, having a motivation to join an organization like ours?
So I think there's a couple parts to that. So I think that, you know, one of the reasons I do what I do is because there's a generational divide happening globally in organizations, and it's happening both in the public sector and the private sector, and of course it affects organizations like SIETAR. And so what we have are, you know, growing populations that are active, engaged professionals. You know, before a generation would retire and a new generation would come in, and we live in a time today where people aren't retiring as early because of the economic recession in 2008. So people have extended their careers 10, 20 years longer. And also we have people living longer who want to be active longer. And so now we have organizations with 4 or 5 generations in the workplace. And so this new sort of generational dynamic isn't because millennials are such an unusual generation. It's because this is a new dynamic that we're seeing in organizations. I also think in the intercultural field that there's a bit of generational divide, because you have a large population of interculturalists who are our most valued, seasoned members of the community, who really were, you know, they really were sort of the founders of the field and the organization, and we value them and their resources and everything that they bring, and everything that they built is now what this new generation of interculturalists who all have master's degrees and PhDs in intercultural communication that weren't available, you know, 20 years ago. I wouldn't have, you know, there was nowhere you could go to get a master's degree in intercultural communication. So now we have this entire new generation of experts coming in, and the world is very different. And so I think we really need to create space for that for new perspectives and new expertise. And I think sometimes we put so much energy into who we have held up in our organizations for a long time that we forget that we're often not making space for new voices. And so when we are selecting speakers for events, selecting presenters for webinars, when we're selecting, volunteers and board representatives, we have a tendency to give a lot of weight to people who've been around for a long time. And as a result, those who are up and coming with new ideas, new perspectives, and different types of experience get overlooked. So there's a balance in that I think organizations need to do. So I don't think that we necessarily need to, I tell companies, when companies say to me, oh, how do we keep our young talent? What do we need? No, you don't need beanbags and pool tables in your office, right? What you need, right, is to create a space where they feel like they belong and where they can contribute. And so I think that is what needs to happen in all of our associations and when we're talking with our clients. Do they feel like they belong? And if people are younger interculturalists are having a better experience in young SIETAR, for example, what's happening in young SIETAR that's not happening in the other SIETARs, right? And I, as somebody who has spent a lot of time at young SIETAR events, which I love, there's so much more dialogue, there's so much more informal time, there's much more community engagement. So SIETAR Ireland, we're planning our first ever Congress here in Ireland. And we're still aiming for November.
Wow, I'm there. Yeah. I'm there. That's the latest I can hold out.
Yeah. So we're planning it for the first weekend in November. And before we planned anything, we reached out to young SIETAR and we said, will you be a partner with us in our Congress? Because we want community engagement. We want people to come to our Congress and put their feet on the ground, interact with the city, interact with nonprofit organizations, learn about what's happening in Ireland around cultural diversity and intercultural needs. And will you be our partner in that? And they were like, absolutely. Right?
Wonderful.
So
wonderful.
This is for us, so that our Congress is a 2-day Congress. It's 1 day of meetings and it's 1 day of engaging with the community in Limerick. We're going down to Limerick.
Wow.
We're going to walk around the city. We're going to engage with community organizations. We're going to learn from experts in the community who are experts in all the different cultural needs here in Ireland. And so that's something that we're doing. And I think that our Theatereuropa Congress could benefit from a little more community engagement, a little more informal conversations, a little, sometimes we put so much structure around things, we lose sight of how important the relationship building is.
Okay, so Tamara, can you give us a heads up on what the focus of the next Congress is going to be, as we're all very much looking forward to the next Theatereuropa Congress?
The Theatereuropa Congress is a hot topic with the board of directors currently. I will say that we have plans in the next months to have a meeting solely dedicated to the Congress. I will say what I know for sure is that the next Congress venue is still going to be Malta. Whether or not it will happen next year or the year after is still to be decided.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, our concerns with our Congress, or our goal with the Theatereuropa Congress, is to bring our community together to learn from one another in a face-to-face setting. Yeah. And we're really committed to making that happen. And the likelihood, even if there are no travel bans or no second wave or all those uncertainties, there's still going to be a lot of limitations on travel. We know a lot of our members who rely on support and funding from their organizations may not get it in the next year. We know that fees and costs for travel are going to go up, and so we really are trying to be as thoughtful as we can and get as much information as we can to figure out when is the best time to host the Congress so that as many members as possible can come and participate. Okay. So we will probably know more. I will probably know more in about a month.
Okay, great. So we'll stay tuned for that. I see we're already 20 minutes into our conversation, and I know that some of our participants would maybe like to ask a couple of questions, but I would still like to at least ask you one more question. Well, actually, there's two things that I'm very interested in. One, I just, in preparation and for our chat today, I was also looking at your website and information about you, and I didn't realize we have something in common, something else in common, and that is that you were also the curator of a TEDx women's event. Yeah. So, yeah, one question I would like to ask is, do you think there's such a thing as a sort of a non-profit junkie? And are you one of those? And the other thing then, taking you more back into also, the work that you do, is to really just look at, what you think are key competences when it comes to leadership, because I saw on your webpage and I was reading your blog a bit that you talk a lot about real leadership. So, and I love this idea because you talk about how, it has to be something that's dynamic and compassionate, which resonates very strongly with me. So that's like a two-pronged last question from me.
So I will say, in addition to being the team lead for SIETAR Ireland and the president of SIETAR Europa, I am also on the steering committee for the University of New Mexico's Mentoring Congress, and I'm also on two committees and a task force for another international organization. So yes. So 100% there's such a thing as a volunteer junkie. I am one of them. And I think it comes from my, I have a really strong desire to serve and be of service to others. And my leadership is really deeply rooted in being of service to others. People ask, when I was taking on the SIETAR Europa president, people said, well, what are your plans? And my plans were to be of service to the SIETAR Europa members. That's my plan. What can I do in this role to be of service to the members so that this organization is better for me having been a part of it? And my leadership comes from the same way. How can I lead in a way that the people who follow me are better for having followed me? And that comes from me really wanting to put other people first, and that's my leadership is about putting people first, and which sometimes means I have to be selfish. Oddly enough, sometimes that's what it looks like. But I think that leadership has to come from an authentic place. I think very often people model leadership, even if it's bad leadership, right? Like I had a boss who led like this and I'm not really sure how to lead, so I'll just do what that boss did, even if it wasn't good. And when I first had my first management position, I was a horrible manager. I thought, a manager told people what to do, and, that's what I thought the role was. And I eventually learned how to lead from a place of values and purpose. And I think that that's what is really important for leaders to lead from as authentic a place as possible and to be as values driven as possible.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you very much. So I would ask our participants, if anybody has a question, you can just either raise your hand or type your question in. I would unmute you. Oh, Vincent, I see, has a question. So Vincent, please go ahead. You should be able to unmute yourself. Vincent Merck. Yes, hello.
Yeah. Hello, ladies. Yeah. Question, Tamara. I've now become part of the old guard of SIETAR Europe, more or less. Thank you for the compliments you made.
Diversity is the key.
Yeah, it's all about generation, you know, in a way as well, part of diversity. I have a question to you as a representative of SIETAR Ireland. Just by accident, I ran into some information about SIETAR Ireland, about the webinars you've organized. Apparently, you don't advertise that. So if I can give you a bit of advice, would be just please advertise what you're doing, because I just ran into it by chance. And I think you've had a few webinars or something, activities in the past weeks, and you're talking about a congress in November. So I think we really like to know about that on the continent. So please, and beyond. So please advertise everything you're doing. I think it's great job anyway. So, you know, looking forward to reading that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you. I will say, you know, here in SIETAR Ireland, we are the smallest national SIETAR. We are the smallest, and as a result, the fastest growing. And we're doing our best to get the word out to people. So if you want to know more, I encourage you to go to our website and to join our mailing list and to follow us on Facebook so you can keep up to date with our SIETAR Ireland events.
Mm-hmm. So are you not using TikTok, Tamara?
I did 3 TikToks yesterday when I was in Northern Ireland.
Really?
I did.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I will keep an eye on that, but that's great. I will sign up. Actually, now when I think about it, I haven't signed up, and I think it would be wonderful if we could also, you know, I know that my students who are studying intercultural management would be really interested in also, you know, generating further, you know, interaction and connecting with others in young SIETAR. So maybe we have a potential there too. Yeah, to coordinate something. That would be wonderful. Okay, does anybody else have a question? There are no other raised hands yet. If not, I have several other questions that I would like to ask. So if nobody else has a question, Vincent said yes, small is beautiful. It can also be dangerous. No. So Tamara, one of the things that you know, because we started off this series also to make sure that SIETAR Austria is active in trying to create or generate a positive mindset around dealing with COVID-19 situation, lockdown, and to also generate a discussion. And one of the things we've asked a lot of the former speakers has been about, you know, what they feel are some of the issues that they've experienced and how they've dealt with them in terms of, you know, moving everything basically online. So I would like to know, one, do you think that, I know we talked about the fact that it's generational difference is more an issue than looking at a specific generation and seeing what they're doing. But do you think that millennials and Generation Z are better equipped currently to cope with a scenario like we've experienced over the last, you know, couple of months? Lockdown, you know, trying to be creative in an online environment generates sort of new ideas. And the other question then is more related again to sort of this leadership element, because I know on your blog there was a post about the 3 steps, you know, that inspire sort of, I guess, teams: trust, respect, and confidence. And then I wonder if you could also talk about that specifically in an online environment. So, sorry, 2 long questions. One.
Yes, I'll do my
Generation.
best. So I think we have to be very, you know, so I'll say this. I think that technology natives or tech natives, which often millennials and Gen Z people refer to them as tech natives, they've grown up with technology, they have a comfort with technology. So from that perspective, I think 100% that they sort of, in terms of savvy, were much, it was much easier for them to transition to online. I know from my generation and those that precede me that sometimes there's a resistance to use technology because there's so much credence is given to, you know, those face-to-face interactions, which I agree, face-to-face interactions are fantastic, they're valuable, but really deep learning experiences can also happen in a virtual space. So, and I think lots of, you know, older, more seasoned folks have been probably pleasantly surprised how productive and how meaningful their online experiences can have. But I will say, I think that there has been an extreme disadvantage. You know, so many people have said to me, oh, well, you know, young people, they don't have, you know, the same interpersonal skills. I actually, at a SIETAR USA conference once, quite a few years back, there was a plenary speaker who said that millennials' interpersonal skills had atrophied. And I thought it was the most insulting thing from a keynote speaker, especially at a SIETAR conference.
At a SIETAR event, oui. Yeah.
And he was so wrong, right? Because personal friendships are so important for young people. They're so important for people. And I think one of the things that we have seen, particularly here in Ireland and also in the US, is that young people are really suffering by not having interactions and being able to spend time with their friends. And I think that that has been really difficult, whereas, you know, folks like me, I've been working from home for almost 15 years. I'm used to, you know, maybe only socializing with my friends once a week, or, you know, communicating with my friends via technology. So it wasn't huge for me. But if you're a kid who's used to soccer and hanging out with your friends at school all day, I think that was a real loss for them. So I think that that's something for us to be really mindful, that even those who maybe are more comfortable and used to technology have also lost out on a lot.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Oh, and then your second question
was this idea about how can you inspire trust, respect, and confidence in, you know, in a virtual interaction?
So I think that, you know, as the board president of the SIETAR Board, I lead a remote team. That's the job, whether it's 2020 or not. And I think that developing authentic relationships with people is really important. And so what that means is that I have a lot of one-to-one conversations with board members. We have a lot of, you know, 3-4 people having specialty, you know, having conversations that focus on different things. It means addressing miscommunications or conflict immediately. It means about being authentic and transparent and honest in my communications, and being consistent. I think one of the most important things for people is to be consistent in their communication, to be timely in your communication, and also to ensure that your communications are honest. And I think a lot of the times people make mistakes in not handling miscommunications and conflict, because that's the uncomfortable stuff. But sometimes you do have to pick up the phone or get on the Zoom or the WhatsApp or whatever it is, and work through some difficult things. And so I can say, as the president, I have a lot of conversations with the board, between board meetings. Our executive team has a lot of communications. I try to communicate with our volunteers that are really doing the majority of the work, our committees. I make myself as accessible as I possibly can, which means that I spend quite a bit of time. You know, I have members email me and ask to chat. If you ask for a chat, I book the chat. That's what I do, and I think that that's really part of it. And being honest, you know, when the board had to have the conversation about our anti-racism statement and what we were going to do, I had to be honest about what it's been like to be a woman of color in SIETAR, and it hasn't always been nice. There have been some moments that were pretty jarring and surprising for me, where this community wasn't what I thought it was. And I had to be honest with the board about that, and honest with the members about that when we had our panel. And that's hard to do, because it's risky to say that I've had bad experiences, and people say, well, this is our organization and we're great and we only do great things. Well, not all the time. And so I think being honest and modeling what you want to see in others. I have so much respect and confidence in our board of directors. I mean, I just really do. And I couldn't be prouder of all the work they're doing in their national SIETARs and then being on the SIETAR Europa board. And so I think that if you want respect, trust, and people to have confidence in you, then you've got to give that to others.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you so much, Tamara. That's wonderful. I've taken us way over. I think this is my longest 6 minutes over today, but it's been absolutely worthwhile. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you so much. I mean, that's a beautiful ending. So I wish you all a wonderful summer. I hope it continues to stay warm in Ireland. Wish you lots of sun, and we're very much looking forward to seeing you in the autumn to continue our Thriving Thursday series, which will, consider in this or continue in this format. So thank you again. Have a wonderful summer. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.